The mist hung heavy and cold, a damp shroud clinging to the ancient Douglas firs that clawed at the perpetually overcast sky above the Cascade Mountains. It was the kind of silence that wasn't truly silent, but rather a symphony of unseen life. The whisper of wind through towering needles, the distant rush of an unseen stream, the subtle creak of ancient wood. Young Ethan, barely out of adolescence, clutched his father's old hunting rifle, its cold steel a meager comfort against the profound isolation of the deep forest. He'd volunteered to track the elk they'd wounded hours earlier, a decision he now regretted with every shallow breath. The sun had long dipped below the jagged peaks, plunging the forest into an inky blackness broken only by the anemic glow of his headlamp. He paused, straining his ears, convinced he'd heard something beyond the familiar woodland sounds. Not a deer, not a bear. Something heavier, something that moved with deliberate, bipedal strides, snapping twigs that no deer or bear could ever break with such force. A chill that had nothing to do with the biting mountain air snaked down his spine. He swung his beam around, its weak light cutting erratic paths through the impenetrable darkness, then, just for a fleeting moment, framed between two massive trunks, two eyes. Not the reflective, predatory gleam of an animal, but eyes that seemed to absorb light, eyes that held a depth, an intelligence that froze him to his core. They were dark, ancient, and filled with an unsettling sense of recognition. He didn't scream, couldn't. His throat was a constricted knot of pure terror. The eyes vanished as quickly as they'd appeared, swallowed by the overwhelming darkness. But the sound, that heavy, deliberate tread, continued, receding into the wilderness, leaving Ethan alone with his racing heart and the profound, terrifying certainty that he had just glimpsed something impossible. He scrambled back to camp, babbling incoherently, his story dismissed as fatigue, fear, and an overactive imagination, a classic case of buck fever. But Ethan knew. He would carry the memory of those eyes and the chilling questions they raised for the rest of his life. Miles away, in the sterile, fluorescent-lit confines of his university lab, Dr. Alan Reed was dissecting the mitochondrial DNA of a fossilized Neanderthal molar. A forensic geneticist of considerable renown, his reputation was built on meticulous analysis and groundbreaking work in ancient primate genomics. Yet, controversy often swirled around him like a persistent rumor. He possessed an almost pathological curiosity for the anomalies, the outliers, the things that didn't quite fit the neat boxes of established science. His colleagues, while respecting his intellect, often teased him mercilessly about his fringe fascinations. He'd published papers on the genetic divergence of early hominids, traced migratory patterns of forgotten tribes, and even consulted on cold cases involving degraded DNA samples hundreds of years old. But he also subscribed to obscure cryptozoology journals and had a well-worn copy of On the Track of Unknown Animals tucked discreetly beneath his desk. Bigfoot, however, was where he drew the line. Folklore, old wives' tales, misidentified bears, he'd scoff, a dismissive wave of his hand sweeping away any suggestion that such a creature could exist. Show me the evidence, the verifiable, reproducible data, and then we can talk. He cherished data above all else, an unwavering beacon in the murky waters of speculation. The morning started like any other. Beakers bubbled, centrifuges hummed, and the faint antiseptic tang of ethanol filled the air. Then, the heavy thud. The delivery man, a burly individual with a permanently harried expression, wrestled a large, insulated cooler onto the lab's receiving bench. "Signed for, Doc," he grunted, wiping sweat from his brow. Feels like it's full of bricks. Dr. Reed, his brow furrowed in mild annoyance at the interruption to his delicate PCR amplification, glanced at the package. There was no return address, just a neatly typed label. Dr. Alan Reed, urgent biological sample. His name, his specific lab address, but no sender. An anonymous package was unusual, particularly one so substantial and clearly containing biological material. His curiosity, an insatiable beast, began to stir. He retrieved a utility knife and carefully sliced through the heavy-duty tape, peeling back the layers of insulation. Inside, nestled amongst dry ice, was a triple-sealed biohazard bag. Within the bag, a specimen jar, and inside that jar, suspended in a viscous cryopreservative solution, was a piece of tissue. It was roughly the size of a man's fist, dark, almost black, and covered in coarse dark hair. The texture looked dense, muscular, unlike anything he immediately recognized. The hair was particularly striking, thick and matted, with a subtle reddish hue under the harsh lab lights. It definitely wasn't human. It didn't look like any common primate he was familiar with either. A knot tightened in his stomach. Ethical protocols screamed at him. An anonymous sample? Untraceable origins? This was a minefield. Analyzing it could be seen as irresponsible, even unscientific, potentially tainting his pristine reputation with the brush of amateur crypto investigation. His colleagues would have a field day. Dr. Evans from the Primate Research Center, infamous for his biting wit, would surely make some snide remark about him finally finding proof of the Loch Ness Monster's toenail clippings. But then, those dark, coarse hairs, the sheer unknown. His fingers, usually so steady, trembled slightly as he picked up the jar. The weight of it, the cold emanating from the cryopreservative, felt strangely significant. Was it a prank, a sophisticated hoax designed to waste his precious time and resources? Or was it something else? The unknown quality of the sample called to the deepest part of his scientific soul, the part that lived for discovery. The rules, the protocols, the fear of ridicule, they all faded beneath the irresistible pull of the unexamined. He had to know. He absolutely had to know what this was. He carefully placed the jar under his stereo microscope, a silent promise forming in his mind. He would analyze this sample, meticulously, rigorously. No assumptions, no prejudices, just pure, unbiased science. The world needed to understand the mysteries it held. If you're as fascinated by unexplained mysteries as Dr. Reed is, and want to follow this incredible journey, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what we uncover next. The sterile hum of the forensic lab was a familiar comfort, a constant backdrop to Dr. Alan Reed's intellectual pursuits. He meticulously laid out the frozen tissue sample, a small dark mass that felt disproportionately heavy in his gloved hand. His initial objective was simple: identify the species, confirm the hoax, and return to his legitimate work on ancient hominid migrations. A sigh escaped his lips, a subtle expression of the weariness that often accompanies tedious yet necessary tasks. He prepared his instruments, the precision of his movements born of decades at the forefront of genetic analysis. The first step involved thawing the sample carefully, ensuring no degradation occurred before processing. He expected a common mammal, perhaps a bear or elk, even some exotic animal that had inexplicably found its way into the Pacific Northwest forests. He was braced for the mundane, for the explanation that would quickly debunk any fantastical notions. As the sample began to yield its secrets, the initial readings started to deviate from the expected. Dr. Reed first noticed unusual cellular structures under the microscope. They were mammalian, undoubtedly, but possessed an inexplicable robustness. a density that hinted at incredible physiological strength. The protein markers, when analyzed, presented an even greater enigma. While some sequences bore faint resemblances to known primate families, many were entirely novel, a complex mosaic that defied immediate classification. His brow furrowed in concentration. This wasn't a bear, nor an elk, and certainly not a human. The patterns were too distinct, too intricate. His initial impulse to dismiss it as a poorly constructed hoax began to waver, replaced by a nascent spark of professional curiosity. The data was simply too elaborate, too biologically coherent to be fabricated from disparate animal tissues. A genuine biological entity lay before him, an unknown. He knew he couldn't pursue this alone without raising suspicion, or more importantly, without a second set of brilliant eyes. Dr. Reed's research assistant, Sarah Chen, was fiercely intelligent, with a mind like a steel trap, and a healthy, almost aggressive skepticism that he deeply valued. He called her into his office, the glow of the microscope illuminating his thoughtful expression. "Sarah," he began, "I need your unbiased opinion on something rather peculiar." He presented his preliminary findings, watching her face as her initial skepticism slowly morphed into a look of profound intrigue, much like his own. She peered into the microscope, ran a few quick checks on the protein analysis, and her usual confident demeanor seemed to waver slightly. "These cellular structures, Dr. Reed," she murmured, "they're incredibly archaic, yet highly evolved, and the protein folding is unlike anything in our databases." She shared his growing sense of bewildered fascination. The weight of his ingrained scientific training pressed down on him, a lifetime of logical deduction and empirical evidence confronting an anomaly. Dr. Reed was a man of science, not folklore. He believed in verifiable facts, not cryptids. Yet the data was undeniably, stubbornly real. He meticulously reran every single test, demanding absolute precision, almost willing an error to appear. He cross-referenced every known primate genome, every obscure mammalian variant, searching for a match, for a logical explanation. Each retest, however, only solidified the initial findings. The cellular architecture, the unique protein sequences, the preliminary genetic markers, they all pointed to the same astonishing conclusion. This sample did not belong to any recognized species on Earth. His rigorous attempts to debunk his own findings only served to strengthen them. The more he sought errors, the more robust the evidence became. The anomaly, the profound deviation from the known, became utterly undeniable as the DNA sequencing progressed. What they uncovered was a genetic blueprint of staggering complexity. Significant portions were distinctly primate, echoing distant cousins of orangutans, gorillas, and even humans, but interspersed with vast stretches of genetic code that were entirely novel. These unique sequences didn't just differ, they represented entirely new evolutionary pathways, suggesting adaptations and characteristics unknown to mainstream biology. It was as if a missing branch on the primate family tree, one believed to have withered eons ago, had not only survived but had thrived in complete isolation, evolving independently. The sheer volume of novel genetic information was overwhelming, indicating an ancient, deep-rooted lineage, a creature that had been forging its own path for untold millennia. A profound realization settled over Dr. Reed, chilling him even in the warmth of the lab. This was no hoax. This was biological reality. The tissue sample was genuine, and the organism from which it came was profoundly anomalous. It represented a living, breathing enigma, a creature whose very existence defied established scientific understanding. His heart began to pound with a mixture of terror, and exhilaration. He had stumbled upon something monumental, something that would rewrite textbooks and challenge the very fabric of biological science. The stakes had just risen exponentially. He clutched the data printouts, his knuckles white. The world thought creatures like this only existed in campfire tales, but the cold, hard data in his hands told an entirely different, incredibly compelling story. He looked at Sarah, and in her wide, awestruck eyes, he saw a reflection of his own dawning comprehension. They were on the precipice of a discovery that would either solidify their reputations or destroy them. The initial shock, both thrilling and unsettling, had now solidified into a relentless scientific pursuit. Dr. Reed and Sarah, driven by an insatiable curiosity and a growing sense of responsibility, plunged deeper into the genomic data. Their laboratory, once a beacon of conventional genetic exploration, now hummed with the quiet intensity of advanced bioinformatics. They employed every cutting-edge technique available, from long-read sequencing to sophisticated phylogenetic reconstruction algorithms, meticulously piecing together the genetic puzzle of the unknown creature. Each line of code, each processed sequence, brought them closer to an understanding that challenged everything they thought they knew about life on Earth. Their screens glowed with intricate visualizations of DNA helices and complex evolutionary trees. The initial analysis had confirmed it was primate, but further sequencing painted a vivid, albeit still incomplete, picture. They found that this creature did not merely sit on an obscure branch of the hominid tree. It represented an entirely distinct lineage, one that had diverged from the common ancestor shared with humans and other great apes far earlier than previously imagined. Millions of years, perhaps even tens of millions, separated its evolutionary path from our own. It was a relic, a survivor from a primordial time, a testament to evolution's boundless creativity and Earth's enduring mysteries, hidden in plain sight. As they delved into the creature's genetic makeup, a clearer image of its physical characteristics began to emerge, inferred from the silent language of its genes. Markers associated with extreme muscular development were abundant, suggesting immense strength, far beyond any known terrestrial primate its size. The density and composition of specific hair follicle genes pointed to a thick, insulating coat of fur, perfectly adapted for surviving harsh, cold environments, perhaps even sub-zero temperatures. Bone density markers indicated a robust, heavy skeletal structure, designed to support a massive frame. There were also intriguing genetic signatures related to metabolic efficiency and specialized digestive enzymes, hinting at an omnivorous diet capable of extracting nutrients from a wide variety of flora and fauna, crucial for survival in remote, resource-scarce habitats. This was not merely a large ape. It was a biological marvel, a living fortress against the elements. The sheer scale of these genetic adaptations led Dr. Reed to ponder the undeniable implications. If a creature of this magnitude, possessing such unique biological characteristics, truly existed, then how had it remained so utterly elusive to modern science? The whereabouts question became a persistent, nagging enigma. It wasn't just about avoiding detection. It was about thriving, reproducing, and maintaining a viable population over millennia. This suggested not just extreme stealth, but also an incredible mastery of its environment, a profound understanding of camouflage, and perhaps an intelligence that allowed it to systematically evade human contact. The vast, untamed wildernesses of the Pacific Northwest, with their dense forests, rugged mountains, and deep, unexplored valleys, offered a plausible sanctuary, an ancient refuge where such an ancient lineage could persist. The DNA's tale was one of ancient origins and profound isolation, It spoke of a lineage that had survived extraordinary geological and climatic shifts, enduring ice ages and interglacial periods, adapting and evolving in parallel with, yet entirely separate from, the hominid line that led to humanity. Its genetic blueprint was a living fossil, a biological time capsule, offering glimpses into primate evolution that were previously unimaginable. This creature had perfected the art of isolation, existing in its own unique ecological niche, untouched by the accelerating march of human civilization, a ghost in the vast, dwindling wild. As the data accumulated, Dr. Reed found himself increasingly preoccupied with the potential public reaction should his findings ever be revealed. He imagined the scientific community's initial disbelief, quickly followed by a frenzied scramble for verification, then a seismic shift in our understanding of zoology and anthropology. The public uproar would be even more intense. Sensationalism, fear, awe, and perhaps even exploitation, all would follow. Would humanity embrace this new discovery with reverence and a desire for coexistence, or would it descend into a chaotic hunt for a creature that had so adeptly guarded its secrets for so long? The implications were staggering, not just for science, but for society at large. His work, he realized, was no longer just an academic exercise. He was holding a secret that could reshape the very fabric of human perception, altering our place in the natural world forever. He felt the weight of this impending revelation pressing down on him, a heavy, silent burden that grew with every confirmed genetic marker. The quiet urgency of the genetic sequencing in Dr. Reed's laboratory began to ripple outwards, an unseen tremor preceding a much larger quake. Whispers of his unconventional research, fueled by his usual meticulousness and Sarah's increasingly enthusiastic chatter, started to circulate through the hallowed halls of the university. It began subtly, a raised eyebrow in the faculty lounge, a pointed question during a departmental meeting, but soon escalated into more direct scrutiny. Dr. Maxwell, a former colleague whose skepticism bordered on intellectual disdain, became particularly vocal. Maxwell, a well-established primatologist, known for his staunch adherence to traditional taxonomy, viewed Dr. Reed's pursuit as a dangerous flirtation with pseudoscience, a potential blight on the university's esteemed reputation. His thinly veiled criticisms, often delivered with a patronizing smirk, suggested that Reed was squandering valuable resources on fantastical delusions, a scientific aberration that needed to be swiftly curtailed. He implied that Reed's once respected intellect was now succumbing to the lure of sensationalism, a tragic fall from grace for a man who had once contributed so much to legitimate genetic research. This external pressure quickly translated into tangible concerns from the university administration. Funding for Dr. Reed's lab, which had always been generous due to his previous groundbreaking work, suddenly faced increased scrutiny. Budget proposals were delayed, equipment requests questioned, and meetings with the dean became less about progress reports and more about justifying the allocation of resources to what was repeatedly termed unscientific endeavors. The words prudent and relevance were frequently invoked, subtle threats cloaked in institutional jargon. A specific email from the grants office, copied to Dr. Reed's department head, highlighted the unusual expenditure patterns in his account, specifically flagging the high cost of advanced genomic sequencing that seemed disproportionate to the stated objectives of his sanctioned projects. It was a clear warning shot, a bureaucratic attempt to rein in his increasingly unorthodox investigation. Amidst this rising tide of institutional skepticism, a cryptic email arrived in Dr. Reed's secure inbox. It was sender anonymous, routed through layers of proxy servers, making it impossible to trace. The subject line simply read, "Proceed with caution." The body of the email was brief, unsettlingly direct. "They are watching. Some for answers, some for profit. Protect the data. Protect its secrets. The truth has many enemies." There was no signature, no further explanation. The message, though vague, resonated with an unnerving accuracy. A confirmation of the growing pressure he felt. It implied a conspiracy, an awareness of his work beyond the academic sphere, hinting at powerful, shadowy interests that extended far beyond the university's ivy-covered walls. The sender seemed to understand the profound implications of his discovery and the dangers it posed. Initially, Sarah Chen, Dr. Reed's brilliant research assistant, had approached the Bigfoot DNA with her characteristic blend of scientific rigor and healthy skepticism. She'd meticulously cross-referenced his preliminary findings, run countless control experiments, and scoured every database for potential contaminants or anomalies. Her initial belief had been that they would eventually uncover a sophisticated hoax, a cleverly manipulated sample designed to mislead. But as the genomic data solidified, as the sequences reiterated their unique, non-human, non-known primate identity, her skepticism began to crumble, replaced by a profound sense of awe and conviction. The evidence was simply too robust, too consistent, too irrefutable. Sarah became Dr. Reed's staunchest ally. Her transformation from skeptic to fervent believer, driven solely by the overwhelming scientific truth staring back from their screens. She began to proactively implement advanced encryption protocols, backing up critical data onto offline, air-gapped drives, and establishing secure communication channels. She even started monitoring network traffic for unusual activity, a digital sentinel guarding their monumental discovery. Dr. Reed found himself caught in an uncomfortable vice. On one side, the university and traditional science urged him to publish his findings, to either definitively debunk the sample as a hoax, or, if truly legitimate, to present the data to the world. The pressure to publish in a high-impact journal, to claim the groundbreaking discovery, weighed heavily. Yet, the anonymous email and his own deepening understanding of the creature's vulnerability filled him with dread. He feared the inevitable circus, the sensationalism, the potential exploitation of a species that had, for millennia, chosen to remain hidden. The thought of revealing this creature to a world that might not understand or respect its existence, a world driven by profit and conquest, was deeply disturbing. He envisioned the creature's habitats overrun, its privacy shattered, its very existence threatened by human curiosity and greed. This internal conflict, coupled with the external pressures, began to isolate Dr. Reed. His former colleagues, like Dr. Maxwell, actively distanced themselves, viewing him as either a charlatan or a fool. Invitations to conferences dwindled, and collaborative projects, once freely offered, became scarce. He was becoming a scientific pariah, an outsider whose pursuit of an impossible truth was costing him his standing in the mainstream scientific community. Yet, ironically, this isolation only strengthened his resolve. The fewer distractions, the fewer dissenting voices, the more clearly he could focus on the data, on the truth. The weight on his shoulders transformed from a burden into a sacred trust. He felt a profound personal responsibility to this unknown species, a commitment born not just from scientific curiosity, but from a growing sense of moral imperative. He wasn't just analyzing DNA anymore. He was becoming the reluctant guardian of a secret that could change everything. His path was now clear, even if it meant walking it alone, guided only by the undeniable truth encoded within those mysterious strands of DNA. The heavy, silent burden of his discovery continued to weigh upon Dr. Reed, a constant companion in the quiet hours of the lab. He was wrestling not just with the scientific implications, but with the profound ethical questions that now overshadowed every genetic sequence, every protein marker. He had become a reluctant custodian of a monumental secret, a truth that could either elevate humanity's understanding of the natural world or, inadvertently, unleash a torrent of chaos and destruction upon a species that had, against all odds, managed to survive. Just as this internal conflict reached a near breaking point, a new development shattered the fragile equilibrium he had established. One Tuesday morning, another package arrived, this one conspicuously smaller and less imposing than the first, yet carrying an even greater sense of urgency. It was left by an anonymous courier, again with no return address, just a plain brown wrapper. Inside, nestled within a small, chilled container, was another tissue sample. This one, unlike the initial frozen mass, felt fresher, less degraded, almost as if it had been collected recently. Tucked alongside the sample was a folded, handwritten note, scrawled in a tight, almost frantic hand. The words were brief, cryptic, and laced with an unmistakable undercurrent of desperation. Still out there. Vulnerable. They know. Look north. High country. The implications of the second sample were immediate and profound. It wasn't just confirmation. It was an advancement. The freshness of the tissue allowed for a level of genomic sequencing and proteomic analysis that had been impossible with the older, more degraded first sample. Dr. Reed and Sarah worked with renewed vigor, their lab a silent hub of intense activity. They extracted mitochondrial DNA with unprecedented clarity, mapped gene expressions with greater precision, and began to paint an even more vivid and detailed portrait of the creature's biology. The analysis of the second sample corroborated every astonishing finding from the first, solidifying the creature's place as a truly unique primate. But now, with the enhanced data, they could delve deeper into its extraordinary resilience. The genetics suggested an incredible adaptability that went beyond mere physical strength. Markers for enhanced oxygen uptake at high altitudes were prominent, alongside genes indicative of exceptional thermoregulation, allowing it to withstand extreme cold. Its metabolic pathways were optimized for incredible energy efficiency, critical for survival in environments where food could be scarce and seasonal. Furthermore, the digestive enzymes identified were even more diverse than previously thought, hinting at a diet capable of processing a vast array of plant matter, roots, bark, tough foliage, in addition to omnivorous scavenging. This wasn't merely survival, it was flourishing in environments that would decimate most other large mammals. It explained its continued existence in the remote, harsh wildernesses alluded to in the note. Perhaps the most astonishing revelations from the second sample pertain to the creature's potential social structure. While direct behavioral observation was impossible from DNA, specific genetic markers related to neurodevelopment and olfaction suggested complex communicative abilities. Genes associated with social bonding behaviors, kin recognition, and even cooperative hunting or foraging were present. This wasn't a solitary beast. The data hinted at a creature capable of existing within a sophisticated social unit, possibly pack living, or at least a highly evolved form of familial bonding. This added another layer of complexity, hinting at an intelligent, nuanced being, not just a brute. The moral dilemma that had been simmering within Dr. Reed now boiled over. The anonymous note's plea for protection and its desperate warning of vulnerability hammered home the immense responsibility he faced. He was grappling with the profound ethical implications of potentially revealing a previously unknown, intelligent, and supremely vulnerable species to a world that was inherently unprepared, one that might react with fear, greed, or outright hostility. The scientific community, the public, corporations, each held a potential threat. Would this discovery lead to scientific enlightenment, or to relentless pursuit and exploitation? Would it inspire wonder, or trigger a destructive hunt for what would surely become the most sought-after cryptid in history? The accompanying note's final words resonated with a haunting clarity. They know. Look north. High country. Protect them. It wasn't just a request. It was a desperate plea from someone who understood the immense danger. Dr. Reed realized that his initial ethical quandaries had transformed into a pressing moral imperative. He wasn't just an academic, pursuing a fascinating scientific puzzle anymore. He was now, whether he liked it or not, the reluctant guardian of an entire species' secret, and potentially, its very survival. The weight of this realization settled deep in his bones, heavier than any academic triumph, more daunting than any scientific challenge. He had to make a choice, and quickly, before they found them first. The weight of that secret, heavy and suffocating, had barely settled when a new, far more insidious threat emerged, one that struck at the very heart of Dr. Reed's laboratory. It began subtly, with minor network anomalies, strange packets of data flitting across their secure channels, like digital ghosts testing the perimeter. Sarah, with her innate technological intuition and meticulous nature, was the first to notice. She'd always maintained a watchful eye on their digital infrastructure, a necessary precaution in an age where data was as valuable as any physical sample. What started as an irritating glitch quickly escalated into a sophisticated, multi-pronged cyber attack, clearly targeting the genomic data stored on Dr. Reed's isolated servers. Firewalls, meticulously constructed and regularly updated, began to groan under the sheer pressure of the onslaught. The attackers weren't just probing. They were actively trying to breach, using advanced phishing techniques, zero-day exploits, and brute force decryption attempts. It was a professional job, well-funded and relentless. Panic, cold and sharp, seized Dr. Reed. He watched over Sarah's shoulder as she furiously typed, running diagnostics, patching vulnerabilities, and rerouting traffic. Her face illuminated by the flickering screen, a picture of intense concentration. For agonizing hours, they fought a silent war against an unseen enemy. Sarah's quick thinking, her ability to anticipate the attacker's next move, ultimately averted a full breach. She managed to quarantine the compromised segments, encrypt the core data, and create multiple decoy traps, sending the digital intruders scrambling. But the attempt itself was profoundly alarming. It confirmed his deepest fears. Others knew, and they wanted what he had. As Sarah meticulously analyzed the attack vectors, tracing the digital breadcrumbs, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. The methods, the specific exploits used, even certain IP addresses, bore an unsettling resemblance to a previous, albeit less aggressive, attempt to access privileged university research data from a few years prior. An incident rumored to have been orchestrated by a corporate intelligence firm, linked to a prominent biopharmaceutical conglomerate. And, chillingly, the trail occasionally intersected with a private network registered under a shell company, a company that, upon deeper digging, had indirect ties to none other than Dr. Maxwell. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening thud. Maxwell, his former colleague, the one who had so vehemently dismissed his work, was not just a skeptic, he was a corporate spy, a pawn in a much larger game. He wasn't just disdainful. He was interested, deeply, commercially interested, in the creature's unique genetic properties. The realization galvanized Dr. Reed. The threat was no longer theoretical. It was immediate and personal. Protecting the research, he understood, meant protecting the creature itself. He and Sarah immediately implemented extreme security measures. They physically disconnected the servers containing the raw genomic data from the university's network, essentially creating an air-gapped system. They bought new, specialized encryption hardware, hiding it within the lab. All future analysis would be conducted offline, on isolated machines. Sarah created multiple encrypted backups, scattering them across secure, geographically dispersed locations, known only to the two of them. Their communication became coded, their work hours erratic, often late into the night, working under the cloak of darkness. The lab, once a hub of bustling academic activity, transformed into a fortress of secrecy. Dr. Reed knew he could not publish the full findings publicly, not without risking the creature's safety, not when such powerful entities were clearly willing to resort to cyber warfare to obtain the data. His ambition for scientific recognition, once a driving force, now seemed a trivial concern compared to the moral imperative to protect a vulnerable, undiscovered species from exploitation. It was a profound internal ethical battle. The desire to unveil this monumental discovery to the world, to revolutionize biology, clashed violently with the responsibility he felt towards this ancient, elusive being. He decided to play a dangerous game. For the university administration, for the wider scientific community, he would prepare a highly redacted, inconclusive report. It would confirm the existence of unusual primate DNA, but would deliberately obfuscate the most groundbreaking findings, making it seem like an interesting, but ultimately dead-end academic curiosity. It would be just enough to satisfy the requirements for his grant, to keep questions at bay, but too vague to be useful to anyone looking to exploit the creature. The ethical dilemma gnawed at him, a constant companion. Was he being a coward, withholding knowledge that could advance humanity? Or was he a guardian, protecting a secret that could destroy an entire species? The answer, he realized, was both and neither. He was simply trying to do what was right in a world that often valued profit over preservation. He began to compile all his unredacted, detailed findings into a single, massive encrypted file. This digital vault contained everything: the raw sequences, the phylogenetic trees, the physiological inferences, the environmental adaptations, even his detailed theories on its social structures. This file, he decided, would not be released lightly. It would be a contingency, a last resort, to be shared only under very specific conditions. Perhaps if the creature itself was ever truly threatened, or if future generations were better prepared to understand and protect it. He was preparing for the unknown, for a future he couldn't yet see, but one he knew would be shaped by the secret he now carried, a burden and a profound responsibility that bound him to a creature yet unseen by human eyes. The air in Dr. Reed's lab crackled with a tension thicker than the stale coffee aroma that usually permeated the space. Dr. Maxwell, a man whose ambition had always been thinly veiled by academic decorum, stood before Reed's desk, his face a mask of thinly controlled fury. The cyber attack had failed, and Maxwell, it was now clear, was the puppet master behind it, his corporate backing a shadowy presence in the room. He leaned forward, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "Reed, don't play coy. We know what you have. The anomalous readings, the sheer complexity of that genetic material. It's not an accident. We know you're sitting on something revolutionary, something worth billions." He punctuated his words with a sharp rap of his knuckles on the desk, a blatant display of intimidation. My employers are not in the business of letting opportunities slip through their fingers. Publish your findings, or the career you've meticulously built will crumble faster than a sandcastle in a hurricane. The threat was explicit, undeniable, an unsubtle promise of professional ruin. Reed met his gaze, a quiet defiance burning in his eyes. He had anticipated this confrontation, rehearsed this moment countless times in the solitude of his lab. He took a slow breath, his mind a whirlwind of tactical considerations. He picked up a slim, bound report from his desk, pushing it across to Maxwell. "Dr. Maxwell," Reed began, his voice calm, almost placid, "I believe you're mistaken. My team and I have been diligently analyzing a peculiar tissue sample, yes, and it presents interesting anomalies." He paused, allowing Maxwell's gaze to sweep over the title page. "Preliminary genomic analysis of an undetermined primate specimen. Inconclusive findings." Reed continued, "However, as this report clearly details, our findings are, alas, inconclusive. While there are certainly intriguing sequences, we lack the comprehensive data to make any definitive claims about a new species. It appears to be a unique variant, perhaps a known animal exhibiting unusual genetic markers due to environmental factors, or even a clever hoax with advanced biological components. We simply don't have enough to go on." Inside, Reed felt a surge of adrenaline. Every word was a calculated fabrication, a carefully constructed illusion of scientific failure. The report, meticulously crafted by Reed and Sarah over sleepless nights, was a masterpiece of misdirection. It acknowledged just enough to avoid outright suspicion, but omitted every single piece of damning, irrefutable evidence that pointed to Bigfoot. The phylogenetic trees were truncated, the unique gene sequences vaguely described as complex polymorphisms, and the inferred physical characteristics were presented as speculative interpretations rather than concrete genetic predictions. It painted a picture of a research project that had hit a dead end, an intriguing anomaly, but nothing more. As Maxwell's eyes scanned the document, his brow furrowed with a mixture of suspicion and grudging acceptance. He clearly didn't believe Reed entirely, but without the hard data, without the full sequence, his corporate backers had nothing tangible to pursue. The money men thrived on certainty, on proprietary information, and Reed had just presented them with tantalizing ambiguity. Maxwell slammed the report back onto the desk. "This isn't over, Reed," he spat, his voice laced with venom. "We'll be watching. Every grant, every publication, every new hire. You won't get away with sitting on something like this forever." He turned on his heel, striding out of the lab, leaving behind a lingering scent of expensive cologne and thwarted ambition. The moment the door closed, Reed let out a long, shaky exhale. He looked towards the back of the lab, where Sarah had been conspicuously absent during the confrontation. Her secret mission had begun the instant Maxwell's presence was confirmed. While Reed engaged in his theatrical deflection, Sarah, with the precision of a seasoned operative, had been distributing the true, unredacted research. She had uploaded encrypted copies of the complete genomic data, along with all supporting analysis, and Dr. Reed's ethical statement, to a handful of trusted, independent biologists and environmental groups across the globe. These were individuals known for their integrity, their unwavering commitment to conservation, and their quiet disdain for corporate exploitation of scientific discovery. Each recipient received detailed instructions. Do not open until a specific future date or upon a prearranged dead man's switch signal. The information was now out there, dispersed and decentralized, a digital time bomb waiting to explode. ensuring that if anything happened to Reed or Sarah, the truth would eventually emerge. They knew their lives, as they had known them, were over. The university, the academic world, it was all a stage they could no longer comfortably inhabit. The threat from Maxwell and his shadowy benefactors was too real, too potent. They began the quiet, meticulous process of severing ties, making it appear as if they were simply pursuing new opportunities. They packed their personal effects, cleared out their research notes, and prepared to disappear from mainstream academia. They would become quiet advocates, operating from the shadows, dedicating their lives to the protection of unknown species and wilderness preservation, far from the madding crowd. In a final, symbolic act, Dr. Reed donned gloves and carefully retrieved the remaining physical samples from the cryo-freezer. The tiny vials, once the source of such monumental discovery, now represented a dangerous liability. He knew, intellectually, that the digital copies were all that mattered now, but destroying the physical evidence felt like a necessary ritual, a final sealing of the secret. He carefully placed each vial into a chemical waste disposal unit, watching as the precious tissue samples, the tangible link to the creature, dissolved into inert compounds. No one else would ever be able to replicate his full research without access to the digital data, now safely in the hands of those he trusted. Just as the last vial vanished, his burner phone, a device he had only recently acquired, buzzed with an incoming message. He hesitated, then opened it. It was an anonymous email, an image attachment. His heart caught in his throat. It was a photograph, clear and high resolution, taken in a dense moss-laden forest. The focus was tight, almost intimately so, on a single, intelligent, dark eye, peering out from beneath heavy brow ridges, framed by coarse dark fur. There was no mistaking it. The eye was undeniably primate, yet unlike anything known. In its depths, Reed saw not fear nor aggression, but something else entirely. A profound curiosity, a silent understanding, and perhaps, just perhaps, a fleeting expression of gratitude. It was a final, brief, yet undeniable piece of evidence, a silent communication from the creature itself, almost a thank you. The world wasn't ready for it, not yet, but soon perhaps it would be. The confrontation with Maxwell was inevitable, a storm Reed had seen brewing on the horizon, made only more volatile by the desperate, corporate greed driving it. Maxwell, his face a mask of barely contained fury, laid out the full extent of his shadowy backing, detailing the immense financial interests that thirsted for the creature's unique genetic properties. He spoke of patents, pharmaceuticals, and unprecedented biological breakthroughs, all laced with thinly veiled threats about Reed's career, his reputation, and his future in academia. Yet Reed remained unperturbed, his calm demeanor masking the intricate counterplay he had meticulously planned. He presented Maxwell with a seemingly harmless, inconclusive report, a masterpiece of obfuscation that confirmed the existence of unusual primate DNA, but deliberately steered clear of any groundbreaking or exploitable discoveries. It was enough to satisfy the university's internal review, a bureaucratic nod to academic diligence, but utterly useless to Maxwell's corporate overlords. The frustration etched on Maxwell's face was almost comical, a victory in itself. While Reed skillfully parried Maxwell's verbal assaults, deflecting and misleading, Sarah was engaged in her own crucial, covert mission. She worked with the quiet precision of a seasoned operative, her fingers flying across keyboards, uploading encrypted files, and disseminating critical data. To a carefully selected handful of trusted, independent biologists and environmental groups across the globe, individuals known for their integrity, their dedication to conservation, and their quiet influence. She distributed copies of the fully unredacted research. These weren't random recipients, they were strategic choices, people who understood the delicate balance between scientific discovery and ethical responsibility. Each package came with precise instructions for a delayed, coordinated release, a slow drip of undeniable truth that would surface years later, independently verified, sparking a debate that no single entity could suppress or control. It was a digital time capsule, a scientific legacy, waiting patiently for the right moment to ignite. With their mission accomplished, their academic lives irrevocably changed. Reed and Sarah prepared to vanish from mainstream academia. Their resignations were quiet, their explanations vague, citing irreconcilable differences and a desire for new challenges. They shed their professional skins with the ease of chameleons, understanding that their old lives were no longer tenable. The university, none the wiser about the true nature of their research or the covert battle fought within its walls, accepted their departures with a mixture of polite regret and subtle relief, happy to see an end to the controversy Reed inadvertently attracted. In a symbolic, almost ceremonial act, Reed systematically destroyed the original physical samples, the tissue fragments, the DNA extracts, all the tangible evidence that could be traced back to the creature. He incinerated them, pulverized them, rendered them utterly unrecoverable. It was a final, desperate measure to ensure that no one else, no opportunistic scientist or corporate spy, could replicate his full research without the digital data already securely distributed by Sarah. The physical proof was gone, leaving only the digital echoes of a monumental discovery, protected by layers of encryption and the unwavering loyalty of a few trusted souls. As the last embers died, a final, brief, yet undeniably profound piece of evidence arrived in Reed's secure inbox. It was an image, sent through an anonymous, untraceable channel. A clear, high-resolution photograph taken in the deep, primeval forest, illuminated by a sliver of filtered moonlight. It showed a large, dark form partially obscured by ancient trees, and within that darkness, a single, piercing eye, brown, intelligent, and unmistakably primate, watching from the dense foliage. There was no mistaking its presence, its silent acknowledgement. It wasn't a threat, it was a thank you. An unspoken pact between species. A profound recognition across the vast chasm of human and wild. Years melted into decades. Dr. Alan Reed and Dr. Sarah Chen, their names slowly fading from academic journals and conference rosters, disappeared from the public eye. They became quiet advocates, working under different names, channeling their expertise into remote wilderness preservation projects and championing the intrinsic value of unknown species. Their lives were simpler, more austere, yet filled with a profound sense of purpose. They found solace in the quiet majesty of untouched landscapes, often disappearing for weeks into the very wilderness they now sought to protect. Their knowledge of the subtle ecology and hidden contours of these places growing with each passing year. Then, as Sarah had orchestrated, the distributed data slowly began to surface. First, a cryptic paper discussing anomalous primate genetics in an obscure journal. Then a blog post by an independent researcher, followed by a leaked genetic sequence that baffled mainstream scientists. The pieces coalesced, independently verified by different research groups across continents, each arriving at the same staggering conclusion. The global debate ignited with unprecedented fury. The existence of Bigfoot, the legendary Sasquatch, was no longer a myth. It was a scientific reality. The initial shock gave way to a powerful wave of realization. The public acceptance of Sasquatch's existence fueled by irrefutable genomic evidence, led to unprecedented conservation efforts for its vast, untouched habitats. Governments, environmental organizations, and even former skeptics united to protect the ancient forests and remote mountain ranges. Understanding that an entire, magnificent lineage had survived, hidden in plain sight, these creatures, now known simply as Homo sylvanus, man of the forest, were finally given the protection they deserved, ensuring their continued survival in the quiet sanctity of their ancestral lands. In his secluded new life, far from the sterile labs and academic politics, an older, wiser Dr. Reed often reflected on the profound implications of his discovery. The sacrifices made, the careers abandoned, the constant vigilance. It all paled in comparison to the awe-inspiring mystery of the natural world he had glimpsed. He felt a quiet triumph, not for personal glory, but for the creature he had helped safeguard. The Sasquatch was safe, its secret now a shared responsibility, its existence a testament to the endless wonders that still lay hidden within our world. The mystery hadn't been solved, it had simply expanded, deepening the human appreciation for the unknown. If this incredible journey into the hidden truths of our world has captivated you, please like this video, share it with others who cherish unsolved mysteries, and subscribe to our channel for more tales that challenge the boundaries of what we believe to be real. And tell us in the comments below, what other unexplained mysteries do you think are waiting to be uncovered? Join us next time as we delve into the enigma of the lost city beneath the ice, another secret whispered by the planet itself.